Uh, Welcome to another edition of our Dean's Innovation and Executive Forum. It's a pleasure this week to welcome Dr. Rola Kaakeh, who got her PharmD here in 2007. Dr. Kaakeh has had a variety of roles, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. Rola, welcome. We wish you could have done this live on campus, but we understand the challenges in the current climate that prevent that from happening. But we really do appreciate you taking some time today to share some thoughts with our students, and hopefully they're going to learn from your experience. And so as we begin, let me just give you a chance to introduce yourself, share a bit about yourself. They would have read, the students have read your bio, but share a little bit about personally, professionally, and where you are today.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me to this. It's always exciting to come back to Purdue and talk to the students. So thanks so much for the opportunity. Maybe when everything gets back into campus, I'll make a visit. So a little bit about me. So I actually come from a family of academics who also happen to have 3 graduates from the Purdue College of Pharmacy. So my sister, my brother, and myself. My dad was actually a professor at Purdue in agriculture, and then my sister, Yaman, was actually faculty in the College of Pharmacy for over 12 years. So I think some of the students might have had her in class just based off of the overlap. But I was a little bit about me. So I was born in the US and I grew up in the Midwest. So that's where most of my training and education has centered. I am what they call a multi-passionate individual. So I think ever since I was a child, the stereotypical question of if you could be one thing, what would you be? I didn't like that question because I would respond with, why do I only get one? So, or I would break the rule or respond with multiple. So if I did respond with one, I would add a few shortly after. So I think that talks a lot about actually my career path as well. So I never really understood the question because I was like, do we pick one profession like pharmacist, engineer, or does that mean a grander goal, right? Be happy, wealthy, or whatnot, right? And so I think that's something we always constantly think about, and students, I think, are really thinking about this as well, right? What's the grand goal? Is there a grand goal or a smaller goal? So I never really wanted one thing to define me, and so that's actually the basis of my story, and so that's where I'll kind of start. So when I am asked, so what do I do or what am I? So I usually give them all my choices, right? Going back to that, I'm not just one, right? I'm a pharmacist, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm an educator, I'm a mentor, I'm a consultant, I'm a public health advocate, right? I'm a world traveler, corny jokes enthusiast, everything you can begin to think about, right? Because I see it as a palette of different colors. And I think that shapes a lot of people's careers, right? As maybe you have read or heard the students, so I started at Purdue when I was 10, so I was quite small, which meant that early on in my education, I had to always sit in the front row, right? I was that stereotypical kid in the front row. But I later then grew into and decided to go to pharmacy school, which, the College of Pharmacy was so wonderful and supportive, right? Because here's this kid that's showing up and is now wants to go to pharmacy school. And I followed in my sister's footsteps, but it's, as you can imagine, it was quite interesting. So I did my doctorate in pharmacy, and then I actually minored in organizational leadership. Again, that element of what can I add to my skill sets? And then I later completed my fellowship at the University of Michigan in Health Services Research Pharmacoeconomics. So based off of kind of all of my experiences, so I've worked locally and globally and engaged with various organizations, so all the way from UN agencies to corporations and startups and whatnot. So I've had a very diverse background. But what speaks, I think, a little bit more about my background is I've been always particularly interested in the intersection of disciplines. Right. And so intersection of industries, professions, people. So you find that people operate in such different settings, right, with very different perspectives, even within pharmacy or healthcare, right? It's not just that it's, completely different industries, and each have distinctive skill sets, right, that make them very unique to them. And so, but they also have varied incentives and different decision-making processes. And so when I would look for that, I would look that everyone was trying to solve something, what seemed actually most times similar problems, but they were doing it differently. And so throughout my career, I actually made it a point to position myself in these various settings to learn those different skill sets, right? So for solving similar problems, why are we not, understanding how each does it better? So right now, that's kind of a brief of that, but currently I'm the CEO and co-founder of Salus VT Group, which is a healthcare consultancy. I split my time and kind of go between West Lafayette and Chicago, but I'm also faculty at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. And then I'm also affiliated with numerous institutes throughout the university. So that's like a very kind of overarching of how I came to have a mosaic, I guess, of different experiences.
So maybe tell the students a little bit about Salus Vitae uh, and what all being a health consultant has involved over the past couple of years.
Well, yeah. So I think traditionally consulting, at least in the world of pharmacy, is seen mostly as in term like long-term care or various types of kind of clinical consulting services. Sallis VT Group was basically founded on the belief that sustainable solutions have to come from diverse individuals. So that means different experts, leaders, and communities working together to like educate, empower individuals, organizations to kind of strive for this equitable, engaged ecosystem. So what that means is that we make sure that who we're consulting with isn't necessarily only those within pharmacy, right? So if we're talking about healthcare, we look to the various stakeholders that are involved and we work with in what we consider 5 key elements, which is education, research, policy, practice, and social enterprise. And so we work with various individuals within different settings. So they can be in academia, right? They can be in pharma, they can be in the non-governmental organizations, all these types of individuals that are looking to build the capacities, right? To improve processes, to solve these kind of similar problems, right? That we're talking about before, but they're each doing it differently, but they have each a perspective that they can offer. So we've taken that route of consulting and kind of that perspective on diverse stakeholders solving these issues and how we can build capabilities. So it involves a lot of like educational and training programs and types of consulting services. So I think when you do hear, I think of consulting services and students in general, it's so diverse, and it tends to be more of, you know, the approach that they take necessarily or the problem that they're trying to solve, right? And so with a lot of different types of consulting services, it's within specific healthcare, you know, they're trying to improve efficiency, reduce costs, that type of thing. And so it really then matters the type of people that they work with and how that. And that tends to kind of grow based off of, you know, the network and the needs and how you're able to link and to link these various stakeholders together.
I want to jump back to something you said in those early introductory comments about as you have been in different roles that you were trying to sort of in a deliberate way, in an intentional way, to learn something specific, because I think that speaks to how your career has developed. Many of our students right now where they sit in RHPH 172 most days see their professional journeys as being linear. That is, they're going to take a job and that job's going to lead to this, and this next job's going to lead to the next job, and it's going to be a sort of a defined path. If anyone that I've talked to in a long time, that's not the case. You've taken a lot of twists and turns, but you've seized opportunities, and there's been unexpected opportunities in your professional life. And so talk a little bit about that, and tell us what that's looked like, and how you in a fearless way sort of embrace those opportunities.
For sure. So I actually came to the realization very early in my education and career that I have way too many interests for my professional career to be linear, right? And so I think when you also identify that, you're like, okay, this isn't necessarily going to be linear. But exactly to your point, so I took the opportunities that built my skill set rather than built my CV. Right. And I think that's the notion of just trying to think, okay, like, what am I building really? Like, am I building stuff that's on paper that maybe makes sense to a linear path, or am I building a skill set? So for example, I wanted to learn evidence-based decision making. So then I went and found a fellowship that taught me about evidence-based decision making and health services research. I wanted to gain more skills in public health. So I made sure to continue to stay connected in that space. I wanted to learn more and gain experience about how to apply evidence-based medicine or decision-making in a pharmacy benefits management company and how my skills could apply there. So I worked in that setting. So basically what I did is I started with the skills in mind rather than I needed to complete a postdoc fellowship because it's what you do post-graduate training and that's how people excel, right? Because like right after you get kind of this notion of like, if you want to stand out, you have to complete residency or fellowship. Yes, but why, right? Like it's kind of this notion. It's because if you have that why, you understand where you're going to go beyond that, right? And so the same applies for all my experiences, right? I wanted to get more experience in community or hospital to see those different perspectives, right? In academia, all else. So I take what I call like a learn add approach. This is not like a fancy term for it, but it basically means I recognize what I can learn and then where I can add value. So in whatever I pursue, those two things have to be there. And so that's kind of that whole skills building thing. And then I also have the notion, and I constantly think that my career and my story are still being written, right? And so like even to achieve those other things, those skills, since it's still being written, since there's still so many problems to solve, there's so much positive impact to be made, it's a growth process, right? And so if I want my greatest achievements to lie in continuously striving for and creating those ripple effects of like positive, sustainable change, right? That adds value, I have to grow as well, right? With those skills. So I want to be that multi-passionate individual that's constantly breaking silos. And by breaking silos, you're getting in diverse rooms with different industries to tackle an issue. So your skill set has to grow. That always has to adapt, right? You can't just achieve it maybe with one training or that type of thing. And so when you want to grow your voice, you want to grow your influence, you want to grow your knowledge in those types of conversations, then you take, okay, it's not going to look linear, right? Because the rooms are going to look different. The places are going to look different. Your settings are going to look different. Everything around you is growing and changing. So that's going to look different, right? And so the only thing that can remain constant is how you can grow and what skills you can develop.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about leadership and innovation. What does innovation mean to you?
So to me, I've kind of simplified innovation because what I say it's just creating something new, right? So if you just think it's something out of the norm. And then when I think like that, I always think it's the addition. So it's the process of adding. It's something maybe we're looking at what has been done and then we're adding to it, right? And so this addition might replace something, right? So that it no longer becomes maybe the norm, but it's still the idea of adding to what currently exists. So by thinking of it that way, you then for me, I self-evaluate and determine, okay, am I adding to a conversation, to my position, to my profession? Right. And in order to add, you have to innovate, right? You're not really adding by doing something else. You're just kind of then repeating, right? And so that's kind of the approach I take with innovation. And if you even think about it, so now a lot of the focus is on what we consider non-traditional as the form. It's actually a new form of innovation. But even the time, so when you add a service or you're in that add initiative, it becomes innovative. And even now, what's considered more of these traditional practice settings, which right when I was a student, like I graduated 2007, right? Like residency, all these new specialties, everything that was kind of coming out, and that was the new practice. And that's kind of solely like there's more people doing that. So is it now becoming traditional and something else becoming? So the traditional was innovative, right? So it's kind of grows, innovation kind of grows. And I think it also stands, I always say, like kind of the test of time and the impact of the influence. So like with the addition, the more people it impacts as well, it can kind of create an innovation kind of ripple effect. But to me, there's also two things that promote or kill innovation. So if you put innovation kind of onto the side and give it a different word, right? Because we keep hearing about innovation all the time. So to me, I think what promotes innovation is learning. So if you're constantly learning, you're positioning yourself to be innovative, right? Creativity, which I think, by the way, everyone is creative. And I think the issue that we as a society have actually kind of defined what creative means, and that's actually restricted people's own perception of whether they're creative, which I think hinders innovation in general. But if you're creative, you're innovative. If you're out of the box thinker, you're kind of falling within that. And then diversity of perspectives, where I think what kills innovation. And so like, if you're very innovative, then you want to be very innovative, you shouldn't be doing this thing, right? It's complacency, right? Complacency in learning, complacency in growth. The term, we've always done it this way, right? Anybody that knows any innovator that thinks, they hate that term, right? This is how it's done is like, nice, that's good to know for background, but I want to do it differently, right? And singular thinking, limited thinking, and ego. So I kind of take those when I think about innovation. I just feel like when you break it up into something that can be a little bit more tangible, to say, okay, if I'm learning, I'm more likely to be creative. If I diversify my perspectives, I'm more likely to be creative, right? Or I am participating in the innovation process. I think it makes it less where it's like, if I don't sit down and come up with the next big idea, that means I'm not innovative. And I don't think that's, to me, that's not how I define it or look at it.
So if you're speaking to students, how can students begin to develop that mindset to be innovative?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think you can be innovative in so many ways, especially even in your learning. Saying that, I mean, still follow the curriculum and do everything and still be competent pharmacists, right? But it's more of thinking, again, to that point of building your skill set. I also think that even as a profession, even students, think beyond just practice areas, right? And what I mean by that is focus on problems that you want to solve. So oftentimes, maybe let's give an example. So if you're thinking ambulatory care, people are often trying to solve maybe a particular issue, let's say diabetes, right? And so the notion of just saying, okay, let's go back and just say, there is a problem that I would like to solve, and then kind of build based off of that. Because no position or practice area might necessarily give you that full fulfillment if you're not kind of working towards these problems or these solutions that you want to solve. And I think that allows you to be more innovative, because it's not saying, okay, I now have in this position or in this practice area, that means innovation is just going to come to me. No, innovation is going to come because when you realize that you have a bigger goal, which is this problem that you want to solve. Learn how it's done to find ways to do it differently, right? But learn how it's done, right? There's this process of saying, okay, you want to generate ideas, but the first step, right, and research, basic research, right, is to do your lit review and see what's out there, what's been done, so that we can innovate. So if you are truly interested in doing something different, you have to understand what's been done. And lessons learned is kind of the biggest thing. Follow the rules. Pharmacists we're great rule followers. So follow the rules, right? But innovation requires a little bit of risk. But when you understand and when you grow and you build your knowledge base, you begin to take calculated risks that you would know would add benefit. And so begin to think like that, right? The end isn't just to take all the risk and then to create something. It's to add additional benefit that won't harm patients. I think we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier too, just in general with Do Good. And then learn to ask good questions, right? Anybody that's done any research knows that that is like a hard part. And to teach any future researcher, they take a considerable amount of time to learn how to ask good questions. So learn how to ask good questions. That is such an integral part to being innovative. I also tell everybody, regardless if you want to start your own business or be an entrepreneur, but have an entrepreneur's mindset. So what that means is you want to, don't be afraid to try new things, right? And so entrepreneurs, for most of the time, they are doing things they've never done before, right? And they have to be okay with that. And so be these out of the box thinkers that actually question conventional approaches. Don't break rules, right? But question them to help to create these positive, sustainable solutions. And with entrepreneurs, it's interesting because there's no problem that's too big for an entrepreneur. Because what they do is they focus on their efforts on actually breaking it down and creating solutions rather than being so clouded with how complicated it is, right? And so I think that allows you to just take something and simplify it, and then just realize that to think innovatively, again, it's new, it's an addition. So you might be thinking things that you don't necessarily read or see, but figure out how they kind of tie in by asking the right questions and kind of building upon that and having that bigger problem that you're trying to solve.
Great, tons of great nuggets there for the students to apply as they move forward. So let's shift now back and let's talk about leadership and what you think the essential qualities of great leaders are and how students can cultivate those qualities right now.
Okay, awesome. So I have so many thoughts on this because I think, okay, so let's kind of break down. There's a few things that I think great leaders do well. They do well, and they do it constantly. And I think that's also important to note, is they identify where they add value, right? So they're constantly evaluating their own contribution, their contribution of their teams or their organizations, right? They define what value means to them, right? But then they also recognize that value can actually mean different things with the people that they work with. So they have what I call these value conversations, right? It's like, how am I defining it? How are you defining it? How can we work together, right? And our value, even kind of individual organizations, really kind of stem from or come from our perspectives, our experiences, maybe our vision, our approach to work, what we can achieve and whatnot, right? And so if you think about that in general, we're all trying to add value, whether it's in our professional or personal lives. So when we strive to add more value, and we do that in the work we do or the relationships we have or the community, which I think, oftentimes we've always seen kind of our career and our personal life as separate, but they begin to merge because so much of your value statements and what you think is important kind of merges within that, right? Kind of understanding that for different perspectives. But so there's always a constant need to add value, understand it, measure it, right, and determine its impact. So great leaders really think a lot about value because they think about the ripple effects and sustainability, right? So for me, I would hope that my initiatives and the stuff that I work on will last quite some time, right, and have an impact and have a value. But for you or the students, and I think the students in general, to be great leaders and actually to be successful too within your profession, identify where you can add value, right? Like, what is your value statement, and know what you can bring to the table. When you bring that, when you kind of have that to talk through, it's much easier also to talk with other professionals about that. They build technical expertise. Again, this depends on the field of the leader, but I know in healthcare, you need some technical expertise, right? Like, you need to be a practice, depending again on what you're doing, but you need to have the knowledge base, right? So when students graduate, they have this minimum level of competency that you would know, right? That, like, as a pharmacist, that they have. So for us in the consulting space, at Sallis VT Group, we have combined like 28 years of experience. So you kind of build that reputation, right? Great leaders also diversify perspectives and experiences. So even if you just take the basic example of our healthcare consultancy, the founders are both pharmacists, but we have different perspectives, different outlooks, we've experiences in different areas, and so that adds value. So there's a great value in breadth of experience. And then also start with understanding before convincing. So what I mean by that is, as great leaders, you should be the last to talk. You should be able to kind of understand, articulate, and think through how these different perspectives and experiences can make an impact. Build a network is big, and I think it's never too early or too late to do that. I think so many of my networks too, I even built when I was a student, and I still, have that network. So don't think just because you're a student or that you're, early in your professional career that networks don't mean anything. They really, really do. The beauty of a network is that not only do you surround yourself with very interesting people, but you also look to learn from others, and leaders do that really well, right? And so when they've surrounded themselves and built their network, no matter how successful they become or how high they grow, they're able to learn from each other. They actually break silos and cross barriers. This one I actually love. So great leaders don't just look at their own team or organization or industry as a silo. They're able to work across industries. This is especially important in healthcare, as we're seeing now, right? Like the fact that so many industries are involved in health, right? Or actually are impacted by health. So the solutions aren't just coming from one industry anymore, right? So the leaders are stepping up to be able to talk with these various different industries. Constantly learning is big. And this one is really interesting because in pharmacy school, I feel like we're always learning facts. You're memorizing and everything, and things are just constantly changing. And after that, but you also have to develop a learning mindset where it's not just learning facts, it's also creating an environment for learning, right? It's just because like, okay, once I finish pharmacy school, I'm not going to finish learning. It's going to constantly change. And they learn different ways of thinking. So it's not what you think, it's how you think as a leader. And I think that's really instrumental because how they do that is they expose themselves, again, to these different backgrounds and experiences. And I think as a pharmacy profession, we need to kind of do a better job at that, because pharmacy students, we spend all the time, or they spend all the time with other pharmacy students, right? And we know once we finish pharmacy that everyone we interact with is not just pharmacists, right? Our impact spreads, and we know this and we teach this, and it's in our curriculums, right? The impact beyond that. They're very deliberate, successful leaders, hard work, honesty, authenticity, really big, flexible, so fail fast, move quickly, and they pivot. Also great leaders, and I think this differentiates a lot. They differentiate between confidence and ego. So as a leader, I think actually a person in general, always check your confidence and your ego, right? Be willing to say, I don't know. And I think this is something we were always taught in pharmacy school, but I'm sure it's kind of consistent. When you don't know, you don't know. You say, I don't know, right? Like you have to know, but like there's also your credibility on the line, right? To have that. Leaders are very trustworthy, right? People trust them. They're kind. Kindness cannot be understated as a leader. And I often tell people to know whether you're kind or whether you're a kind leader. When people interact with you, do they feel better about themselves or worse, right? Are they inspired to help themselves or demotivated, right? And so then I think that kind of integrates within that. Great leaders are also very grateful and generous, right? So humans are wired for service to others. And I think that's so important. And like, for example, me in my own story that I briefly mentioned above, I missed a key element, right? Missing in that there's an individual who played an instrumental role in my own career, right? And so that's my co-founder, my sister, Iman, right? So she was the first one to enter Purdue at 10, and I just followed suit, right? And so she holds 5 clinical boards and has extensive career in academia and beyond. And although so many of my mentors have been male, right, I find it even more crucial, right, to recognize the women and those individuals that are really kind of paved the way, right, who've positively shaped us and maybe positively shaped the way for women to excel. So for example, to me, that's my sister, right, that paved that and did that to so many pharmacists and professionals. So since she paved the way in the university profession and beyond, I am grateful for that, and that assists me to grow. And so as a great leader, you have to realize that yes, you may grow, you be tired, you put in the effort, you put in the work, but there are so many other people within your industry, directly or indirectly, right, that are helping shape the way and pave that. And I think that's kind of those things that I think about as a great leader. And I think that all of those factors builds into that humility, right, the humility of a leader.
Many of our students, most of our students, and you know this was your story too, when you first graduate, you will not be most likely the person in charge, the big L leader, right? But you still have a chance to have influence and lead from where you are. And for you, what does it mean to be the leader when you aren't the person in charge?
So to me, you might not be the big L, but you will be a decision maker of some sort. So, I mean, you can give me an example of any position, right? And I'll tell you how that person's a decision maker, right? So everyone has an opportunity to be a leader. So anyone that makes a decision, anyone that interacts with at least one person, right? And so if you're solving any sort of problem bigger than yourself, then you have the opportunity to be a leader. Okay, so then remove big and then it's just leader, right? And so then leaders, if you think about it, they provide services to others and they're able to like influence and have that. So to me, I always recommend I always tell people that you can add value in whatever position you're in, and don't let the job title define the extent of your leadership. But when you're not the person in charge, you can still be the leader, but you have to identify who the ultimate decision maker is. So the one with the big title may not actually be a leader, right? The quote unquote leader, but they are the decision maker. And so I think that's where you have to make the distinction as well. And so you can lead and add value in any position, but it's also critical that you have to be able to deliver that output of your leaderships, right? So what you've achieved or hope to achieve to the decision maker. So that means you have to be intentional with your actions and communication. And so that to me is key. So wherever you fall on that spectrum, you also have to realize that there's a decision that has to be made. And whether the leader has that or someone else has that, there needs to be that connection as well.
The question next then is, as you think about just giving advice to our students about their futures, and we preach to them, and you know, our mission here is to prepare the next generation of leaders in pharmacy and the pharmaceutical sciences. What advice would you give them that you haven't already given?
Okay, so so I have so many things, mostly for the fact there's some items that I feel are very obvious, but must be constantly emphasized. And then there's stuff that I wish more people told me, I think, kind of going through, and something I actually even keep reminding of myself until now as you kind of grow in your career. The first one is define what success means to you. Right. I think that's so instrumental. We often burden, students are really burdened, even individuals are burdened based off of what they think success really means. Is it that I go into this practice setting or that job or this residency or whatnot? So define what that means to you. Also, you don't need to always make big strides, but you do need to make these small intentional behaviors. So I have this thing where I call them micro successes and macro successes. As you can see, I've been trained by health economists. Everything's got the macro and the micro, but so the micro successes, so there's many items in life that you will deem micro successes, right? And then you have these big macro successes. I mean, micro success might be like I got an A in therapeutics, right? That leads me towards that and I'm more equipped. And then there's a lot of big macro successes. But you have to recognize that even very successful leaders don't have many macro successes, right? And so you're going to have a lot more many micro successes, but they're going to add a lot of value in multiple different ways. So don't think of them as like lost successes. Next one is, what's your purpose? Like, people hear about that. It's this thing that's going around, right? Constantly identify and evaluate your why. But where I would like to add to that is that it's going to change. Like, so your why that you decide now and you think you're going to build your career on, it's probably going to change. So don't let it burden you. Like, don't think that like you have to come up with this amazing why that you're going to have to live with the rest of your life, right? Also, this idea of what dreams and careers intersect. To me, dreams come with challenges. I call them the reds, right? Like the challenges, fears, obstacles, risks, but they're all part of the equation, but they all come with what I call fulfillment, right? Authenticity, value, and opportunities. And so when you dream, you aspire for something. That's that kind of addition, right? And you have to remember that, again, that complacency kills dreams. So to grow in no matter what area you go in, again, you don't have to go business side, you don't have to go, whatever setting that you decide to be in, the same applies, right? So focus on fulfilling the dreams and not just building a career. So having those somehow merge. I always talk about this whole concept of moving beyond our potential, because I think especially when you're very intelligent, and I think a lot of the pharmacy students, right, at Purdue are very smart, have a lot of potential, and they're always told you have so much potential and tremendous potential. But I think it's actually more important to refocus our efforts on being inspired and adding value through these micro and macro behaviors. So to tell someone that you have all this potential, I feel like is a huge burden, because personally, I think fulfilling one's potential remains a constant struggle for many, right? A person feels burdened that they can't reach their highest potential. They have to figure out what they need to do. So how we exercise our potential, so that's how we use our potential, is what makes the difference, right? So how we take action on our visions, right? So we have to move beyond this potential and focus on the value that we create. So you can tell your stories through the value that you add and the potential that you have, but potential should only initiate your conversation, because for a career, you need that action, right? So if someone's telling you you have enormous potential, that is wonderful, but that's the beginning of the conversation. The rest of it should be, in the rest of your career, is your value add. So the key here is actually action. So this is what's going to differentiate you from everybody else, right? It's action, as we all know, is the key to success. So that's all great. That's acting and wonderful. But now let's talk about failure, because failure looks so different outside of the classroom, which I think everybody knows, right? And especially if you're very ambitious and high achieving, you might have never failed in the classroom. Might have never done that. So you will in your career. I think a lot of people tell that to a lot of students, but to what extent and what that means is so incredibly different to different people, right? So take that with a grain of salt and figure that out. Everybody probably tells you this: work hard, focus, whatnot. Focus on developing those skills rather than gaining those titles. So Adam Grant has this wonderful quote, which I love. It says, "Set goals for the kind of person you want to become." Right. And I think that's so instrumental for people that have diversified their careers, because they have kept that in mind, right? They know that they can contribute and they can work with that. So constantly develop your skills. You're a sponge, right, of knowledge. You can learn from everyone you meet. The skills you've acquired through your time at Purdue and your experiences, you can put all of them to good use. But you have to realize too that you've learned so many skills, but there's so many more that you need to learn. Right. And so be proud of what you're learning and the institution that you're learning it from. But they also, part of the responsibility is to have that kind of continuous learning. Right. So don't be complacent. You're going to get to this question a lot. I call it the then what question. Right. So you're going to ask yourself, and then everyone's going to ask yourself. So you're going to get that position that you're working for, and then people are like, then what? Right? You're going to achieve that, and then people are like, then what? Right? And so you will get that question. You will try to answer as much as you can, but just, and that's how you take that question, how you grow would kind of depends on that as well. So when you have too many ideas, potential, I think an entrepreneur is someone that has that. Again, identify a problem to solve and then filter your ideas. It's important to keep in mind that you don't have to do it all within the first few years. I think people run, and I think pharmacists, we make that mistake a lot. We run. Like we're like, okay, we're out of pharma school. We have 3 years. We need to do this, and then we're set. Well, yeah, but like your career is like 30 years, so don't feel like you have to do it all. I think that's something that so many students get burned with on graduation, because they're like, have you decided what you're going to do for the rest of your life? It's not the rest of your life, right? Also, keep in mind, the more success you have, the more you grow, the more that time should humble you, right? No matter how much your achievements are. So you should be proud of yourself, every milestone, but that. Also, get comfortable with uncertainty. So that's a theme I think that we're currently living with, unfortunately, right? So things are constantly changing. There's something new. It may seem unclear, but that's okay, right? So even when the paths are clear, people still divert from the paths. So don't make it seem like that is because something is unclear that it's not. So it's important to really understand your comfort zone and realize how you deal with uncertainty. And so by doing that, to me, it's very much just setting clear expectations and kind of knowing. I always talk about this, and I think a lot of institutions are very much like this as well, the strive for diversity in the room, right? So expose yourself to different settings, perspectives, and information, right? Trust me, talking to non-pharmacists will help you as a pharmacist, right? Or talking to a pharmacist with a very different interest than you will help you as a pharmacist in whatever setting that you're in, right? So everyone has that mosaic of characteristics that they live and worked by. And I think that innovation actually lies in how we position those characteristics and skills. And I think we're going to see that too as the pharmacy profession grows and more of these different positions open up. We begin to think about how we're using our skills. And I think we've done that traditionally, right? We know that pharmacists are, good at medication therapy management, all of this, and we've grown off of that. But I think it's very important to have that. Diversity also allows for greater idea generation. So if you are interested in innovation, this is for you, right? And so I always say diversify, but also stay focused, right? Don't go everywhere. Too much diversity within that. Network is important. I think everybody will tell you that building a network is absolutely crucial. A supportive and empowered culture is also so important. Wherever you work, whatever you do, it's good for business, right? An environment for success is so important. So creating, even if you in the future are going to be a leader and you need to create these environments, create inclusive and diverse environments, right? And when I say that too, no matter what you do out in practice, you have to be considerate of people's challenges. So everyone's challenges are different, and we have to kind of stop judgment within that. So why I say that is that there's different small acts of leadership. So for example, if a shy person starts, speaking in a meeting and they want to deliver a message, right? To them, they have stepped up. That's maybe a challenge that they were overcoming, but they're moving towards leadership. And I think we need to encourage that more within our profession and kind of moving forward within that. Okay, a couple more items. So empathy, humility, and kindness go a long way, right? So be humble. There's a lot that, you are graduating from a top pharmacy school. That is wonderful, but you will realize there's a lot you know, but there's a lot that you don't know. And what you don't know should motivate you, right? And so know your limitations and surround yourself with great people, right? Have empathy, be humble, be authentic, right? And that will not only improve your life, but the lives and of others, and create these sustainable, meaningful change. There's a quote I read. It said, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." So kind of keeping in that mind. So for you, be yourself and make sure to always be kind. I'm not going to say that. Comparison. Stop comparing yourself to others. I think that's a key to a lot of successful leaders as well, and successful individuals. They might look to others, but again, to see what they don't know, how they'll be inspired, cheer them on, grow with them, and realize that, right? We hear this saying a lot: comparison is the death of happiness. Communication skills is your big thing as well. Listen twice as much as you speak. The whole notion of having 2 ears and 1 mouth is something that one should always remember. And you're always going to be communicating. Your communication style will always change based off who you're talking to. Who you're talking to determines your communication style. You don't determine the communication style, right? So be able to fine tune your strategies is very important. When you have conversations, I have 3 things that I say. It's the 3 I's. It's be interested, be inspired, and be insightful. So don't merely focus on inspiring others, but also on being inspired. So I think greater inspiration facilitates also innovation. So inspiration can stem from various sources. So that's collaborating with professionals with different backgrounds and interests, working with organizations and institutions in different sectors, maybe reading about topics outside of your area of expertise. Seek out personal inspiration stories that connect you to that purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, right? And then continuously share that. Talk to as many people as possible and be willing to learn something new. Within the university setting, I think this is so wonderful, right? How many experts can you get, right, in different areas within one area where you can just walk around or email or have the opportunity to speak to? So do that, take advantage of that. And then go into those conversations with the mindset of being fascinated or interested, right? But then also keep in mind, and this is something, especially as you're working towards that kind of bigger problem, is you have to keep asking yourself, are you having conversations with the people that you're helping? And so that kind of keeps you within the loop with that. And then one major thing, and I think as we grow, and I've seen this a lot with my own mentors and role models and whatnot, is this whole, giving back, becoming a role model, becoming a mentor, and becoming a sponsor. And again, it's like the network, it's never too early to do that, right? And so you have a responsibility to pay it forward and become good mentors and role models for those not only that seek your own types of position, but it's to also offer them those types of perspectives and skills that you might have within that. Also, for the women listening and the students, so women actually have demonstrated themselves, right, as effective leaders in wherever they are. And in healthcare and in pharmacy and everything, we need more women leaders. But I'm not saying that to say that everyone needs to be a CEO or everyone needs to run after those positions. You can be leaders in so many other different ways based off how you define leadership and how you define success.
Well, Rola, we've covered a lot of territory in our conversation today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our students?
No, I think for that, I feel like I could talk about this forever, but right. And so I think it's so instrumental that, you keep thinking not only what you want now, and what you want now might not be something that you want 5-10 years, right? But you're building towards that. You're choosing something and you're acting on that now to build something greater than that. So don't constantly feel burdened to kind of have all the answers, right? And really have courage, work really hard, take the risks, but keep trying. And I think our profession is going to see so much more innovation, so many new opportunities, and know that you're really kind of at the forefront of that. And it's a very exciting time. I think it's always been right within that. If you're an innovative, there's always a good time for that, and innovative person. So good luck with your own endeavors, and I hope you found this useful. And if you do, I would have hoped to do question and answers, but if you do want to reach me, you can I'm on LinkedIn, so you can add me there. You can also just email me. It's if you have any questions, I'd love to be of assistance. So
That's a great place to stop. We'll, if any of the students would like to have your email, if they just let myself know or Mrs. Neary know, I think we know how to get a hold of you. But again, thank you for sharing some thoughts with our students today.
of course, thank you so much. I hope this is useful.